Back to the summer of '67, Mr. DJ, one of the most richly textured records ever. Exotic, circus sounding, just talk about adding some spice, big time. I don't care. Some of the critics thought it was a second rate John Lennon record, but it was genius. The wordplay. Keep all your money in a big brown black bag or a big black bag inside a zoo. What a thing to do. Talk about being irrelevant and yet somehow being meaningful at the same time. It's the genius of the Beatles, baby. That's all I gotta say. Baby, you're a rich man on Billboard's Hot 100. Let's bring it up right now. Billboard's Hot 100, the week of August 26, 1967. At the B side of All You Need Is Love, All You Need Is Love, which went to #1 that summer. The I'll get into it just a minute. There's just so much to be said. The Beatles, You're a Rich Man at number 41 is dropping. And just ahead of it at number 40, also dropping White Rabbit by Jefferson Airplane, and Got Groovin' by Booker T and the MGs, and I Take It Back by Sandy Posey and that same general area, and Last Night in the Pits to Barkays, throwing that on some soul and some psychedelic rock and roll. The Beatles, Baby, You're a Rich Man, and written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney. This song recorded May the 11th, 1967 in a 6-hour session not at Abbey Road. It was recorded at the Olympic Sound Studio, I think it was Southwest London. I might have wrote it down wrong, Southwest or Southeast London. Well, the Olympic Sound Studio was a big recording studio. The Rolling Stones recorded there. The Who did some recording at the Olympic Sound Studio. This was a big recording studio up there, almost up there with Abbey Road back in London, and well, in London back in the day. And one of the reasons why this song sounds so exotic, John Lennon played an instrument. I did some research on the instrument. As a matter of fact, I spent most of the time researching the instrument on this record. It's called the clay filen. Clay filen, I believe is how you pronounce it. It was a forerunner of the synthesizer, the analog synthesizer. It was a keyboard. It was basically a keyboard that came with a separate amplifier and a separate speaker. And John Lennon, you could set this thing up to play, to mimic several instruments. And John Lennon played this instrument in an oboe setting. There were a number of switches that could change the pitch, the tone of the sound that was produced. The speakers sort of added to the distortion that the clay violin could produce. And you may notice that the song sounds kind of wavy a little bit. It sounds like it's kind of going this way and that way a little bit. It's a little bit subtle, but if you listen closely, well, the reason for that was the clay violin, it had a vacuum tube oscillator. It was implanted with a vacuum tuned oscillator that produced this buzzy, it produced a buzzy waveform. And you could alter this waveform by using a low or high pass filter. You can tell I'm getting out of my comfort zone talking about these instruments. But it is fascinating, that vacuum tube oscillator. I wish I could do this like Mr. Spock on Star Trek. It'd be quite logical about it. Delivering the information in this Spock-like logical voice. And I found out that this instrument was used on Telstar back in the early 60s. Well, anyway, the B-side of All You Need Is Love and One More Thing. One of the engineers. Remember this. Never ever forget this. When you wake up in the morning, let this be the first thing in your head. What I'm about to say, if you're a fan of this record. One of the engineers who assisted George Martin on this record, Eddie Kramer. He's worked with Small Faces. He did some work with Jimi Hendrix, I think. But he produced albums by Kiss. Alive, Love Gun. He produced those big platinum selling albums by Kiss. Later on in the 70s, Eddie Kramer. Yes, had a hand on this record. Baby, You're a Rich Man. Baby, You're a Rich Man. Dadgummit. Well, I guess All You Need Is Love was the more commercial sounding record, and it sucked the oxygen out of this B-side. B-sides normally don't do as well as the A-side anyway. Baby You a Rich Man peaked at number 34, and it was on Billboard's Hot 100 for only 5 weeks. Well, talk about a go-figure moment. It's the Beatles, a classic.